topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's, of course, a wonderful time for me, not only because we are stepping into holidays, but I get to be with you. And I love it when I get to spend time with you. So I've got a wonderful kindness story from Spain. Actually, one of our listeners, Gabriela, shared that they recently had floods. And so I think so she lost quite a bit in that. And what she shared was that some of neighbors, like, 2 or 3 streets over, kind of like came and they helped out people in their street. So what a beautiful story as to how people can come together. And especially, I'm very thankful for each and every one of you for spending time with us and listening to our show. And for those of you who have not got our books, please get our books, whether it is The Entrepreneur's Garden or Expert to Influencer, because they will impact your life. They will support you. And also, it's a win-win all the way around. Not only we get to help you, but together we get to help entrepreneurs across the world through kiva.org. Let's bring in our guest, Dr. Kadar.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well and happy to be here.
Well, fantastic. So, we get started from the childhood or an earlier part of your life. Do you recall a moment or a person who left a positive mark on you?
Gosh, lots and lots of people along the way. I'd say my parents were the initial influencers, and I'm not sure that this is something that you're aware of, but I was a child refugee, actually, and it's not part of the story that I'm writing about right now, but we spent a year in refugee camps, and throughout it all, we're always hopeful and positive, and it all turned out very well for my family.
Oh, that is phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about your journey into how did you stay hopeful, especially with parents being in those camps and you hear about things, and unless you experience yourself, it's just hard to fathom.
Yeah. Basically, when we left, I was born in Hungary, and my family left after the 56 revolution. And throughout it all, it was kind of an adventure to me. I think part of it was that I wasn't really aware of the dangers involved. And my parents always told me that life would be better once we got to America. And as it turned out, it was.
Well, it is so wonderful to hear and so hopeful that, you went through all of this and the life turned out to be well. So what was it that drew you to becoming a doctor?
My undergraduate major was actually physics, but I wasn't totally loving it. So I was looking around for something that involved science, but dealt more directly with people. And as I looked around, medicine seemed to be a good good solution for that, and it turned out very well for me. I've enjoyed being a physician and taking care of people and interacting with my colleagues and my patients.
Mm-hmm. And so it is notoriously known that, especially when students are in training to become full doctors, especially in the residency, those years, they're pushed to the limit, working so many hours. So how did you get through those years?
I'd say the toughest year of my life was probably when I was a surgical intern. That was very difficult because in those days, uh, we would be in the hospital over 100 hours per week, and it was very exhausting. Once unfortunately, my residency training was much more benign than that, and I enjoyed interacting with my colleagues and my patients.
Mm,
So that made up for the uh, more exhaustion than ideal.
right. So there are so many options to choose from, right? Like you could have become a doctor in so many different disciplines. How did you select your discipline?
Um, well, I'm an anesthesiologist, and it's it's kind of the most intense manipulation of human physiology that anybody does, and it's a good interaction of the science of medicine and the humanity in medicine. When people come to you for surgery, they tend to be very anxious, or often are, and you have the ability to calm them down and make them more comfortable in the way you interact. But you also have the ability to do so pharmacologically, and there are physical skills involved, as well as the knowledge that you combine those things together. And so I think it's a very exciting specialty to be in, because there are so many skills involved, and so many different things that you get to do.
And there's a lot of high pressure as well, right? Like a little bit of dose here or there can cause a lot of issues with human body. And so as you were kind of going through the training, how did you deal with that stress?
I think the idea is to learn as much as is known, and therefore be confident that you're doing the best that you can. Now, there are situations where patients have an incurable or a fatal condition, but all you can do as a human being is do the very best as possible to do with the present level of knowledge. And I think the idea is to get to that level, to have the knowledge and confidence in your knowledge that you're doing the very best that can be done, and that is I think the best that you can do, and that is reassuring. There are, of course, frustrations when things don't go well, but you have to be confident that you've done everything that can be done, and if you're at that level, then I think it's not so difficult. It's more reassuring.
So
And let me just say that the vast majority of times things do go well.
Mm-hmm. And so what I'm hearing is that mental resilience is so important to build, because not only it grows your capacity, it also brings you joy, because that's one of the beautiful things of being a human, that we keep on passing level after level, that there is no limit. As they say, even sky's not the limit. So after you were done with your getting your MD, so how did you decide, whether to go to in a hospital, or did you take the path of doing your solo practice?
I was interested in academics, and as well as taking care of patients. And so I ended up at a hospital that I think has a good balance of the two. I work at Cedar Sinai, which is an academic institution, but it's a private practice setting as well. So it kind of in some ways has the best of both worlds in that you do have the academic discipline and the conferences and at least some opportunity to do research, but it's also primarily a clinical practice place. And getting back to what you were talking about before, one of the things that I describe in my book is my father had a cardiac arrest, and I was there when that occurred. And obviously that one of the most intense things that can happen is a resuscitation. But we have essentially a number of steps that we take that are known to be currently the best way to resuscitate somebody. And essentially, if you know the steps to go through and you go through those steps, then either there's a good response or not a good response. But you have to be able to know those steps and then go through them. And that's, to some extent, it's what we do in the rest of anesthesia as well.
I see. So tell me, when did you experience the life-threatening disease? I mean, like, you had the cardiological problem. Like, after how many years into your service and like working as a professional doctor?
Oh gosh, must have been about 25, 30 years. And right around 30 years or so. And essentially, I'd been in great health my entire life. I was a college athlete. I was on the UCLA gymnastics team as an undergrad. And I continued to work out. I ran lots of 10Ks. And it was during a workout, actually. I was in the gym working on the elliptical. And about 9 minutes into a pretty intense workout, I started feeling some burning under my breastbone and under the sternum. And now I was well aware of that. One of the things that happens that we face in medicine is denial. Patients don't want to have a life-threatening illness, and so often they'll go into denial when they first have symptoms. So somebody might have feel a lump, but this lump is not so big, it's not so hard, so I'll just ignore it, it'll go away. And of course it happens in cardiac disease as well. And I was very well aware of denial, and I was also very well aware of the most common presentation of coronary artery disease, which is pain in the center of the chest that comes on with exercise and goes away fairly promptly with rest. And that's exactly what I had. And so what did I do? I did exactly what lots of other people do, which is go into denial. I knew I didn't have heart disease. I was in great shape. I'd never had a major illness. I didn't have the usual risk factors, did not have high blood pressure, was not overweight, never smoked, didn't have the usual risk factors. And I was 62, which is relatively young to be having that kind of a problem in somebody who doesn't have the risk factors. So I figured, I don't feel well. I'll just stop working out today. And then 3 days later, I was again back in the gym. And again, about 9 minutes into a workout on the elliptical, the same thing happened. So I thought, okay, I know I don't have heart disease, but what would I tell anybody else who came to me with these symptoms? And then the answer became obvious. So I think the first lesson to me in this illness was to separate the situation from yourself, because it's much easier to be objective when the patient is not you. And that's why doctors are kind of told, if a doctor treats himself, he's got a fool for a doctor and a fool for a patient, because you really need to be more objective than you can be about yourself. And so at that point, I said, well, it became obvious that I would have talk to a doctor and have an electrocardiogram and have a stress test. And so then I called my doctor, and they're sort of the second lesson that I think they tell about in my book is when I called my doctor's office, they gave me an appointment. I think it was going to be like in 3 weeks, but I knew that this was a little more urgent than that. So then you have to talk to the person who can make a triage decision, because the people in your doctor's office are their job is to fit you into the slot, and a routine visit is not the same as a visit that's more urgent. And once you talk to your doctor and tell them what symptoms you have, then you can be put in further in front in the line. And so a couple of days later, I had a stress test, and that by that time, about 2.5 minutes into this test, I started having symptoms, and then I looked over and saw that there were abnormalities all over my electrocardiogram. And then the following day, I had the angiogram, which I was hoping would just show a single vessel that could be dilated, and I'd be back to work the following day. But that didn't turn out to be the case, and I ended up having to have open heart surgery for a 3-vessel disease. Now, one of the vessels that had about an 80% occlusion was the largest coronary artery, and that lesion is often referred to as the widowmaker, because it causes sudden death so often. So I was fairly fortunate that the diagnosis came in a timely manner, and I was able to have proper intervention. And I've basically been in good health for the last 14 years since then.
Yeah, no, there are so many lessons to be learned from this. And so many times what happens is I have clients who are from different walks of life, from healthcare industry, tech industry, and they may be experiencing some health issue, and they say like, oh yeah, I have this important project that I'm working on. I've got this offsite. I've got this decisions. I've got the strategy planning for the next quarter, and all of these things that pop up, right? That seem to be taking the precedence over anything else. So based on your experience, what would you tell them? That I'm not saying that panic at every single thing that shows up, because you don't want that either. But what are the steps that, doesn't matter whether you're a professional or whether you're in any industry or an entrepreneur or anywhere, what would be the first steps when you start seeing the symptoms?
Well, I think obviously we all walk a fine balancing line between being a hypochondriac and ignoring obvious symptoms. So I think that the way to get over both of those is take it away from yourself. Because in my case, I knew I didn't have heart disease, but if somebody else had these same symptoms, I'd certainly tell them to get worked up for heart disease. And I think that the way for anybody else as well is to take it away from themselves, to ask the question, what would I tell my best friend if they came to me and told me, hey, I'm having these symptoms, what do you think? And then I think then you get a more objective opinion. And I suppose you could talk to your spouse or your loved ones about it as well, and ask them what they would do under those circumstances. And actually, one of the things is the people who do have a significant other tend to get better medical care, because they can talk to somebody intimately and be given that sort of advice.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned it earlier as well, separating yourself from the situation, looking at it objectively. And so many times, if you're just doing the regular maintenance, just like a car, so for example, having your physical checkup and just having the whole blood panel. So if something is wrong, it would show up. And what are your thoughts on that? Okay, if there's a symptom, just go and get it checked out.
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on what the symptoms are, because every
Right.
headache is not a brain tumor.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're having persistent headaches that aren't going away, then you can't ignore that. And likewise with chest pain in particular, which is most likely to result in sudden death, it's not something that you want to ignore for any period of time, because uh, timely intervention is life saving.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is that one-offs and like things that go away, it's okay, kind of give it some time. But if you are seeing persistent chronic symptoms, do pay attention to it.
Absolutely, and it also depends on the kind of symptom it is. But I think in heart disease, if you have pain in the center of the chest, that comes on with exercise and goes away with rest, then that's a pretty clear sign that something should be investigated. And of course, in some situations, it's not in the center of the chest; it can be in the left shoulder or in the jaw. But basically, pain that comes on in that basic area, up the upper part of the body, and comes on with exercise and goes away with rest, that's really a clear sign that you're having you should check out whether that's due to a cardiac cause or not.
Hmm. So that is, those are very important points for anyone to kind of keep in mind. So going back to your story, you mentioned that you had open heart surgery and the recovery can be tough. I'm not a doctor, but from few of my clients that I've heard. So if you could share with us your journey during recovery, right? Because here you were treating,
Yeah,
working with patients, and now you're in a completely unfamiliar world.
yeah. I think one of the lessons to me in that was to expect the unexpected. Now, once I had my diagnosis, I felt that my goal was to have the fastest, most smooth recovery ever from coronary artery surgery, and some of that goes back to my background. When I was while I was in college and working out in gymnastics, I thought that doctors routinely exaggerated the amount of time it would take to get well, because my teammates, they would come back and be told, oh, you need to be rest for 2 months, and in a month they'd be back in the gym doing their routines. And I didn't realize that I had an atypical sample there, because young college athletes tend to be more motivated and in better shape. So once I got into medicine, I realized that doctors were usually giving essentially the average amount of time that it takes to recover. But I had definitely had the attitude that I was going to do everything possible to get well as quickly as possible. But I had a number of complications along the way. So the lesson to me was to expect the unexpected, and there were different things that came along. For example, one of the things is I had an attack of horrible hiccups. Now, I'm aware that hiccups can be a complication after coronary artery surgery, and hiccups are usually a minor nuisance. But I learned in medical school that hiccups can go on for months and years, and have sometimes even been fatal. Now, when I first heard about it, fatal hiccups sounded to me like the attack of killer tomatoes. But when I had my heart surgery, after initially I had a few hiccups. Now I was told, and usually it's due to the irritation from chest tubes. After surgery, there's some drain tubes that are left in, and those come out sequentially one by one as as you start to recover. And so when I had 4 drains, and when the first 2 came out, I started having a few more hiccups. And I was told, well, when the others come out, that'll go away. And when the last one came out, it was like the finger in the dike, because I started having hiccups on top of hiccups on top of hiccups. It was like a staccato barrage of hiccups, and it just went on and on and on. And it was just like a horrible bout. And it basically took my doctors about over a day to get to a proper medication for that, because there are lots of different ways you can get rid of hiccups. And one of it is to reach high and swallow or do anything that irritates the back of your throat. But I had another problem at that time, and I was having trouble swallowing. So they started with some mild medication, and finally got in about a day and a half, I had GI consult, and they gave me a very strong medication that put me to sleep as well as stop the hiccups. And then they had to back down on the dosage. So it was a somewhat unexpected complication for me. And the other one that I just alluded to was I had trouble swallowing after the surgery. And I wasn't aware of this as a complication. Now, perhaps I should have been, but it's not a very common complication after coronary artery surgery. And it was very difficult for me to eat. Every time I tried to eat, it was a stressful bout of just trying to gagging and coughing and sputtering, and it was very frustrating. And finally, I had an ENT consult who told me that this can sometimes happen, but it never takes more than a month for it to go away. And that was sort of reassuring. In my case, it went away in about 2 weeks.
Mm. Yeah. So it's just kind of being diligent about your own health and working through it. So a lot of people go through long recoveries and all that. So what would you recommend? How can they get through that marathon of healing?
I think that basically my approach, and I think the approach that's the best approach is to look at, what do I need to do to get over this? What do I need to do to get well? What should be? And I think one of the things is clear communication with your caretakers, because for example, when I had the swallowing issue, if I would talk to my doctors about it, and they would write it down on the chart, but nothing was happening for a few days. And finally, it was just getting to be such a frustrating experience and causing me so much difficulty that I basically had to tell them, look, this is the number one thing that needs to be addressed right now. And I think that communicating clearly, not exaggerating, not getting hysterical about something, but just clearly communicating, this is what's my number one issue right now. Can you help me deal with it?
Mm-hmm.
And saying that in a calm manner, I think is the best way to communicate with doctors. Now, of course, when you're having a lot of stress, it can be difficult, and patients sometimes do behave in ways that they wouldn't be proud of in other circumstances. And that actually happened to me at one point. The one thing that I would probably change in the way I communicated with my caretakers is, one day I woke up and I had this yellow wristband on me that said that there was a balance issue. Now, to me, I'm a gymnast. I don't have a balance issue. And to be told that I have a balance issue was kind of a gratuitous insult. So I complained and made a big fuss over it, which at other times in my life, I think I would have probably just laughed it off. But when you're in the hospital, you have a lot less control over your life than at ordinary times. And so frustrations do get to people. And I think that there's a fair amount of allowance for that. But really, the best way to approach things is to just explain this is the reason this is the problem I'm having. This is the reason it's bothering me. What can we do about it to get to help me? I think that's the approach I had almost all the time.
That's a good approach to have, because it's again going back to it that, like, having that objective mind, and at the same time, and so many times, it's people do say that, the hospital food is so bad, and just kind of being there. So, like, how can people make big gains with small actions?
I think that the approach should be to try to do whatever you can to help yourself. And one of the things that I was told before surgery was that after surgery, get out of bed as soon as possible and walk and do exercise, because one of the problems, if you stay in bed, you can get clots in your legs, and that can cause an embolus, and that can be quite dangerous. And so I was very much prepared for that. I alluded before to gymnastics, get back to the gym in half the time that they're expected to get well. And so I was prepared to do that kind of thing. And right away, the first day after surgery, I was in pain, and I very much wanted to just lie there and not move, because everything I did was causing pain. But I knew that getting out of bed was important and walking was important. So I did that and pushed myself to walk further than I was comfortable with. And I think sometimes that's what you have to do to push yourself a little bit, to move yourself along on the road to recovery. And I've had patients who wouldn't do that, who would just kind of, lie there and say, well, if it hurts so much, I'm just not going to do anything. And that obviously leads to a much longer recovery, and perhaps not a full recovery. So you do have to have the mindset that even though this is not a pleasant time of your life, but you need to push yourself. And one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that having a loved one who's supportive is very important. And my wife was part of what I tell in my book about my experience on this is her role in this. And she was also determined to try to help me get well. And I think it changed her life in many ways as well. And in some ways in a positive manner. And I have a little section on how that affects, because basically a major illness is a family affair. It affects everyone around you, and the closer they are to you, the more it affects that person.
That's very true. So, like, once you recovered, you mentioned that you went back to work. Tell us a little bit about that journey, that, like, how did you kind of get through that transition, and how did you integrate yourself back in your job?
So I was told initially that it would take about 6 weeks before I could go back to work. And honestly, the last 2 weeks of my recovery at home was what I could have gone back sooner, because I was feeling well enough by about 4 weeks or so. So it was kind of a mini vacation, although I still had things that were, the center of my chest was still tender and painful. And the one thing that I couldn't do back at work is sometimes at the end of the case, we lift the patient's back so that they can breathe a little bit better rather than lying flat. And that puts exertion on the chest. So when I needed to have that, I would ask, of the other doctors or nurses to help me do that. But otherwise, I was fully capable of doing everything that I needed to do. And in a way, it was gratifying to go back to work because people were very, very welcoming. There was a package of goodies for me the first day I came back, and there was a sign behind the anesthesia machine that said "Welcome home," which I thought was very nice because it was my workplace is my home, away from home, sort of my second home. So felt well. It felt good to be welcomed back and to be in an environment that I was comfortable in and being productive again. So it was not. I didn't find it to be problematic. I found it to be refreshing and rejuvenating, actually, to be back at work and to be able to do what I wanted to do.
Oh, that's fantastic. So as we near the end of our show, are there one or two things that you would love our listeners to walk away with and share with them?
I think there's several points, main points. I mean, one of the things that I want to emphasize is to overcome denial. The best way is to take it away from yourself and ask what would I advise my best friend if they had these symptoms. And then if you have a major illness, to expect the unexpected, because things do come up that you don't expect, and you just have to deal with it. And I think at each step along the way, the question you should ask yourself, okay, what is the thing that's bothering me, and what can I do to make it better? And to try to communicate that as clearly as possible to your caretakers so that they have the knowledge of what's bothering you. I mean, in medicine, one of the most important things is the medical history, what the patient tells you. That is critical information. And so if you can communicate that clearly, I think that'll get you further ahead. And to always have the attitude of what do I need to do to get better as quickly as possible. And I talk about a lot about that in my book, which is called Getting Better. And hopefully people will find that useful. I felt I wanted to do, while I was recuperating, I felt that I was learning a lot from the experience. And one way of making it a positive experience instead of just a challenge and a negative experience is to tell other people about it and hopefully be of service to them in that way.
Absolutely. So if anybody wanted to connect with you, where could they connect?
I have a website. It's called gettingbetterdoc.com. It's just those words, Gettingbetterdoc.com. And also, my book is called Getting Better, and it's available in Amazon's and other places that books are sold.
Oh, fantastic. Of course, you have given us a lot to think about so that people can get ahead of it, because so many times what happens is that recovery and all of that can get long, but you can get ahead of things so that things don't go really, really south or go from bad to worse. So thank you for sharing your insights and knowledge.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your program. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, because you are the life and blood of the show. You are the soul of our show. Please reach out to us. Let us know how can we support you. And we want to wish you a very, very happy Thanksgiving with you and your loved ones. And may you have a blessed Thanksgiving. And also, I want to thank Juan for his technical support. And until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.